I was looking out the window, watching the car slowly pull out of the driveway, then turn right and disappear down the street. Surprisingly, I didn't feel the emotional reaction I had expected. 10 years of my life had just slipped away, and yet I shrugged my shoulders dispassionately. Perhaps I should have felt sadness or regret, but instead, I felt nothing but indifference. Shaking my head, I decided to distract myself by fixing the dripping faucet in the kitchen. As I headed for the sink, I mentally replayed the events of the last half hour. When I got home from work, I was surprised to find my wife, Peggy, already sitting at the kitchen table with a full glass of wine in front of her. It wasn't unusual for her to get home before me. She often arrived half an hour or so after I did. What caught my attention was the absence of dinner being prepared and the rare sight of her drinking wine. Peggy hardly ever drank, and her demeanor only reinforced my suspicion that something was wrong. Wasting no time, she asked me to sit down and admitted, with a somber expression, that she needed to talk to me. Grabbing a beer from the fridge, I joined her at the table. She looked at me, her expression heavy, and said, "Rob, I know you've noticed it too. There's been this distance between us for the past 6 months. I can't pinpoint exactly why, whether it's on my side or yours, but it's there. I've tried to talk to you about it, but all you ever say is that we're going through a rough patch and things will get better. But I've come to the conclusion that we need some time apart. Not a divorce, just a temporary separation. I feel like I need to be alone, Rob. I need to take a step back, evaluate my life, and figure out where this gap between us is coming from. Maybe this time apart will give both of us the chance to reflect on our relationship from different perspectives." "Come on, Peg," I replied. "It's not that bad. Every marriage has its difficulties. But we can't solve our problems if we don't stay together and communicate. Talking won't change anything, Rob," she said, her voice tinged with sadness. "You only see one problem in our marriage, that we're not close anymore. But it's deeper than that. You think the solution is for me to undress, to make love to you, and that will magically fix everything. But I don't even want to anymore. I don't know why I recoil from your touch, but I do. My love for you hasn't changed, but something is wrong. I need time alone to sort out my feelings and my thoughts. This isn't about throwing away decades of marriage. It's about finding a way back to each other. I feel like we need this break." With that, she stood and added, "I've already packed my things. They're in the car. I'm going to stay with my sister until I find a place of my own. I'll call you once a week to stay in touch." Then, without kissing me goodbye, she left, saying she had to meet Mary at 7 o'clock. I sat there, stunned, the reality of our separation sinking in. For a while, the news of our separation didn't spread among our friends. Most of them supported me and tried to cheer me up during what they knew was a difficult time. True to her word, Peggy called me every week to check in. She'd ask how I was doing, and I'd always tell her I was coping. Then I'd ask how she was holding up, and her answer was always the same. She was fine. Every time, I cautiously asked if she was ready to come home, but her response never changed, "Not yet." As the weeks passed, however, unsettling rumors began to circulate. I heard whispers that Peggy had a boyfriend, that she was living with him. At first, I refused to believe it. I clung to the hope that everything was as she told me, that she just needed time alone to gather her thoughts before coming back. But as the rumors grew louder, I couldn't shake my doubts. Determined to find out the truth, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I began trying to uncover where Peggy was staying, intending to investigate discreetly and put the rumors to rest once and for all. My efforts, however, were fruitless. No one I spoke to was willing or able to provide me with any information. Frustrated and suspicious, I confided in my friends, Tom and Tay, over dinner. I told them about the rumors and my plan to hire a private investigator to track down Peggy and uncover the truth. As I spoke, I noticed a silent exchange between Tom and Tay, a quick glance that made me suspect they knew more than they were letting on. "Save your money, Rob," Tom finally said. "The rumors are true. Of the people who knew, many were aware of what was happening. However, you were too dear to them for anyone to tell you the truth." "Tell me what?" I asked, though deep down I already seemed to know the answer. "Peggy left you to be with Adam White," Tom replied. "Adam White? Who is he?" "I've never heard of him," I asked in disbelief. "He works with Peggy," Tom explained. "So, she just left me to live with him? Something doesn't add up. Why didn't she just file for divorce if she wanted to be with him? Why go through this whole thing with separate accommodations?" "You know Peggy, Rob," Tom replied. "She plans everything carefully. She's the kind of person who always has a backup plan, a contingency in case her original idea doesn't work out. After dating White for almost a year, it seems she initiated the separation as an exit strategy. That way, if life with him didn't meet her expectations, she'd have a way back. All our friends knew about this, but no one had the heart to tell you." Annoyed, I stood up, threw my napkin onto the table, and sarcastically thanked them for their honesty before storming out of the house. On the way home, I couldn't shake the disturbing realization of what I had just learned. Peggy and I hadn't been intimate for over a year because she had refused. I hadn't been able to snuggle up to her or even touch her because she didn't want me near her. And all that time, she had been betraying me. Foolishly, I stayed home, pretending to be a faithful partner and waiting for her to come back. Meanwhile, my so-called friends knew about her infidelity and did nothing to help me. They left me to sit alone, staring at the walls, waiting. But now the wait was over. The next day, I arranged a meeting with the Corliss Investigative Agency and provided them with an advance payment. I gave them all the information I had about Peggy's place of work and her lover, asking them to find anything they could about the two of them. Afterward, I returned home and started making a checklist of things I needed to do to end my relationship with Peggy. However, I decided to wait for the detective agency's report before taking any action. I wanted to be fully prepared. After making the list, I began thinking about other tasks that needed attention. It had been almost 16 months since I had last been in an intimate relationship. Peggy had refused me for an entire year before our breakup. Even though I had been a faithful husband, I didn't want to remain celibate now that I knew the truth about her infidelity. As I sat at the kitchen table, considering how to move forward, Tom's words about Peggy's calculating nature echoed in my head. After living with her for so long, I realized he was right. It dawned on me that Peggy likely had a ready-made plan for every possible outcome, including my eventual discovery of her betrayal. Perhaps she had even anticipated my reaction to the truth. Her most ambitious plan, it seemed, was to live with Adam White. I imagined her watching me closely, ready to use any misstep I made against me in the event of a possible divorce. My carefully compiled checklist now felt useless. It was clear she might have already accounted for my every move. I needed to start over and make a new plan. This time, I realized that many of the actions I wanted to take had to be done immediately. Time was running out, and I needed to act quickly to protect myself from her insidious tactics. I thought about various ways to gain the upper hand, but nothing concrete came to mind. The next day, I went to the bank to deposit my salary. While there, I decided to check the safe deposit box Peggy and I shared. When I noticed that Peggy had been checking the box regularly, I realized she was likely monitoring my actions. The thought unsettled me. I knew she would act swiftly if she suspected I was on to her. As I stood there, considering my options, I took out 5 certificates of deposit from their plastic envelopes and headed upstairs to the bank's copier. I made copies of all 5 certificates, then returned the originals to the drawer. Until Peggy checked the box herself, she wouldn't know anything had changed. Knowing she was watching me, I casually mentioned to the bank employee that I was planning a fishing trip to Mexico. Then, I deliberately took my passport out of the drawer, making sure it looked like a casual move. After leaving the bank, I had the 5 certificates safely hidden in my pocket. From that point on, I began visiting the bank twice a week, cashing out 1 certificate at a time and paying the early withdrawal penalty. When I returned home, I carefully hid the cash. I avoided using credit cards, fearing they might leave a trail or cause problems. The only cards in my name were an American Express card, which required full payment upon receipt of the bill, several gas company cards, and a low-limit Visa card. All were exclusively in my name. Peggy, on the other hand, had an extensive collection of credit cards issued in her name alone. Many of them had significant limits. Since I was responsible for paying the monthly bills, I knew the details of her cards and their limits well. I continued to carefully manage the payments, ensuring everything appeared normal while I worked on my exit strategy. I kept track of the balances on each of Peggy's credit cards, making sure they stayed in good standing. I always made at least the minimum payment for each card. Once I made a list of what I needed, I spent the next few weeks using Peggy's credit cards for my purchases. My intention was clear. When I eventually left, Peggy would be left with significant credit card debt. I was pleasantly surprised by how much I had managed to upgrade my belongings during that time. I bought a brand new Dell computer with all the latest features, a 700G Remington rifle on eBay, a digital camera, and a modern mobile phone that could seemingly do everything. As for the house, it belonged to Peggy. It was her inheritance from her parents. I didn't have ownership of it, but we had used it as collateral for a line of credit to install a pool and jacuzzi. Fortunately, we had already repaid the borrowed amount, meaning the credit line was still available. If I played my cards right, I could access it before Peggy realized what I was doing. I started to understand why Peggy had insisted on keeping me in her house during this trial separation, instead of asking me to leave. By allowing me to stay, she ensured I would continue to believe the separation was temporary. Naturally, I would hold out hope that she would return. But now, her motives were clear to me, and I decided to act. I cashed out my accounts at work, paid the associated penalties, and hid the money securely. Then, I leaned back in my chair and waited for the private investigator's report. At the same time, I considered how to move forward. One thing that baffled me was how I could act discreetly without risking Peggy, or someone she hired, spying on me. I couldn't afford to make a mistake. To cover my tracks, I devised a plan. I would leave town for the weekend under the guise of going on a fishing trip. Peggy knew about my love of fishing, and the trips I often took were well documented by the fish I brought home. I doubted she would go so far as to hire a detective to monitor something as ordinary as a fishing trip. Besides, she probably didn't feel the need to overstep. Or so I thought. But wasn't I the fool? Hadn't she been cheating on me for over a year? It was Friday when, just as I was preparing to leave work, Tay called and asked me to stop by her house on my way home. I tried to refuse, but she insisted it was important. Reluctantly, I agreed. When I arrived at their place, Tay greeted me warmly and led me into the living room, where I found Tom sitting in an armchair. He stood up, shook my hand, and invited me to take a seat. "Make yourself comfortable while I grab you a beer," he said, heading toward the kitchen. Then he added, "Tay needs to talk to you, Rob, and I fully support whatever she has to say." With that, he left the room. Confused, I exchanged a puzzled glance with Tay. She motioned for me to sit down and said, "Rob, you're going to need a drink before we start talking." Moments later, Tom returned with a Bud Light, handed it to me, and announced he had work to do and would be back late. As he left the house, Tay took it as her cue to begin. Rob, your sudden departure from dinner that night really offended us. Tay started. I opened my mouth to reply, but she held up her hand and continued, Please, let me finish. Although we understand your reasons, it still hurt. We care about you deeply and didn't mean to upset you. It's a difficult situation because Peggy is my friend too, but we were hoping she would understand that she belongs to you. We know you have feelings for her, or at least you did, but we weren't sure if what she did was enough for you to forgive her. We stayed silent because we didn't want to make things worse. If you've reconciled with her, not knowing the truth, and you find you can't live without forgiving her, that's on our conscience. This is our apology, Rob, but it's only part of why I wanted to talk to you. I was puzzled by her words. What do you mean, Tay? I asked. She hesitated before replying. Rob, we also know about your recent actions and the kind of person you are. You're the kind of man who would be faithful to his wife, not someone who'd stoop to revenge or anything reckless. But how long has it been since you've been close to someone? The question caught me completely off guard. I stammered, unsure how to respond. It was then that I noticed what Tay was wearing. A low-cut blouse that highlighted her ample cleavage, a short skirt that showcased her legs, and high heels that only added to her allure. Despite our friendship, I couldn't help but feel a physical reaction. Before I could answer, I remembered Tom's earlier comment, and suddenly the pieces fell into place. I realized exactly where this conversation was heading. In a low tone, I admitted, It's been a year and a half. Leaning closer, Tay whispered, I'd like to change that, Rob. Feeling conflicted, I froze. I couldn't betray my friend Tom, no matter how tempted I felt. I hesitated, preparing to get up and leave as the tension between us grew. But before I could move, Tay grabbed my arm and gently pulled me back down. Tom doesn't mind, Rob, she said softly. That's why he left, to give us some time alone. It's not a pity offer. Tom and I have been talking about this for months. You deserve what we need, so hopefully I can help you, and you can help us, Tay explained. I was caught off guard. I don't understand what you're talking about, I replied, confused. She looked directly into my eyes and said bluntly, To put it simply, Rob, Tom is infertile, and we want a baby. We want you to be the father. I was stunned. Speechless, I stared at her. Finally, I said, You just told me you believe I would never cheat on Peggy. Yes, she replied, placing her hand on the bulge in my trousers. That was before you found out about Peggy's actions. Now that you know the truth, you're no longer connected to her. Why me? I asked in disbelief. We want someone we know to be the father, not just a random person. We also want you to play a certain role in the child's life, as their godfather. You'd always be present as Uncle Rob, she explained calmly. This is wrong, Tay, I protested. It makes sense, she insisted. What if something happens to Tom and me? Who else but Uncle Rob would take care of the baby? What if the child needs a liver transplant or some other medical procedure? Could we trust an anonymous donor? Even if we found one, would they be willing to help? And how long would we have to wait on a donor list? We've thought about all the possibilities, Rob. We want you to be part of our family. Or are you saying you don't find me attractive? She stared at me intently, her voice soft but firm. Then she began stroking me and said, Your actions speak louder than your words. She pulled me closer, whispering in my ear, Being the father of my child has its advantages, Rob. We'll have to be intimate many times to ensure I get pregnant. I won't limit you to just my most fertile days. In fact, I won't even tell you when those days are. This could take weeks, even months. Rob, how long has it been for you? She pressed her lips to my neck, her voice low and enticing. "We'll support each other on this journey," she assured me. I hadn't been intimate in so long, and I could feel my resolve crumbling. "Now, we can go into the bedroom and get serious about making this baby," Tay announced. All my doubts seemed to vanish as she began giving me pleasure. Unable to resist, I got up and followed her into the bedroom. I had heard that intense lovemaking could increase the chances of conception, so I was ready to give it my all. "No endearments, Rob," she said firmly. "I want this to feel different. Let's do our best and make this baby." She reached for me, pulling me toward her, and whispered, "Make love to me." I eagerly climbed onto the bed, and our passion ignited as we merged in pleasure. The connection we shared in that moment was stronger than anything I had ever experienced before. After we climaxed, Tay propped herself up with a pillow to give the sperm the best chance to succeed. Watching her in such a vulnerable position only reignited my desire, and I longed for another round. As we moved together again, I couldn't help but hope that this time would be just as satisfying. I found myself wanting to repeat the experience again and again. Afterward, Tay tucked the pillow under her again, ensuring the best chance of success. As I prepared to leave, she kissed me at the door, thanking me for my actions. "I want to continue doing this every day until I get pregnant," she said with a smile. "Tom doesn't mind, but he's used to being intimate 3 or 4 times a week. I don't want to leave him with leftovers. Call me tomorrow, Rob." On the way home, I couldn't stop thinking about what had just happened. Then a troubling realization hit me. If Peggy had been keeping an eye on me, surely she would have noticed my visits to Tom and Tay's house. She would have seen Tom leave and me staying for hours. The next morning, I called Tay to share my concerns. To my surprise, she reassured me. "Rob, don't worry. Tom didn't actually leave the house. He just went down to his workshop in the basement and stayed there until you left." This revelation stopped me in my tracks. Being intimate with Tay while believing Tom was absent was one thing, but knowing he had been in the house the entire time added a new level of complexity to the situation. Could I continue if I knew he was just downstairs? Tay seemed to understand my hesitation. Her voice was soft and soothing as she said, "Don't worry, Rob. Everything will be fine. I promise." Later that day, Tom called and invited me for a drink after work. He said there was an unpleasant situation he wanted to discuss. Sitting across from a man I had known for 20 years, and whose wife I had just been intimate with, felt incredibly awkward. Tom must have sensed my discomfort because he addressed me directly. "I know you're confused, Rob," he began. "Damn it, buddy. I'm embarrassed too," Tom said, his voice heavy with emotion. "I need to have a serious talk with you about the situation we're in right now. First, I want to emphasize again that I'm completely okay with the arrangement between you and Tay, as I mentioned when I left you two alone. But there's something important that Tay hasn't fully revealed to you yet." I looked at him, confused, as he continued. "She might have mentioned her desire to have a child and my infertility, but she didn't tell you the whole truth. The truth is that I've been struggling with dysfunction. Intimacy has been nearly impossible for over a year now," Tom confessed. "That's why Tay was so passionate and intense with you. She's been trying to make up for lost time." Tom took a deep breath before continuing. "She justified herself by saying she didn't want to give me more time to hide behind my male impotence. She didn't want me to feel less masculine, even though I know she wouldn't judge me. But I could tell that Tay always puts me first, even in difficult times. Unlike Peg, who seemed to think only of herself." Tom's words hit hard as he poured his heart out. "Tay is very sexually energetic, unlike Peg, and my inability to be with her intimately caused her great disappointment. Despite her efforts to stay patient, I knew it was only a matter of time before she sought intimacy elsewhere. It may sound cruel, but that's the reality. I listened quietly as Tom continued. I understand that Tay cares deeply for me and would try to hide her needs, but I could feel that something was wrong. How could I not notice? If she had found satisfaction elsewhere, her anxiety would have disappeared, and I would have noticed the change. I love her, Rob. She's everything to me. I'd be lost without her. But if she had cheated on me behind my back, I wouldn't have been able to continue our relationship. Tom paused, taking a deep breath before going on. I knew the reasons behind her actions, and I could understand her motives. But I couldn't stand deception. The only solution, in my opinion, was to face the situation head-on. Thankfully, Tay isn't the kind of person who would secretly date or have affairs behind my back. She's not like that. Sure, she might act impulsively in a moment of weakness, maybe in a motel room with a stranger, but she could never do something like this knowing I was aware of it. Tom's voice grew more resolute. We needed a consistent, sustainable solution. So, Tay and I got together and brainstormed possible options. But we couldn't come to an agreement. Our thoughts kept coming back to you, Rob. At first, we hesitated. We were afraid that if we chose you and Peg eventually came back, it would disrupt our progress. We thought we'd have to start over again. Tom chuckled darkly. We were so sure that Peg would eventually come back to you. Everyone knows that Adam White is a complete jerk. Peg will figure that out sooner or later and come running back to you, confident you'd never know about her betrayal. I wonder why she underestimated your intelligence. Rob. It's almost funny, really. She seemed so sure that your love for her was so strong, you'd never suspect any deception on her part. And in a way, she was right, at least for a time. He took another sip of his drink and continued. The long separation made me realize something was off. Now that you know the truth, and so do I, it's clear that Peg is no longer a part of your life. That realization allowed Tay and me to finally approach you and discuss this openly. Tom looked me in the eye and said, Rob, I want a baby. But unfortunately, I have a problem that doctors can't solve right now. Until then, someone else will have to provide my wife with the intimacy she needs. I know it might seem strange, but making love to Tay could actually save my marriage. I'm not against it, but I need to know that you're okay with it too. I struggled to find the words. The whole situation felt surreal. Even though it had already happened once before, it still felt unreal. Tom looked at his drink, then back at me. The thought of not being able to take care of my wife, Rob, it's heartbreaking. But the thought of losing her? That's even worse. I need you to do this for me, buddy. Can I rely on you? I looked at him, stunned, then finally nodded in agreement. On Sunday, I invited Tom, Tay, and 3 other couples over for a barbecue. After the other couples left, Tom went to my office to use the computer, while Tay and I went upstairs to my bedroom. As I undressed, Tay lay on the bed and urged me to hurry up. In my house, on my bed, we'll do everything my way, I said, asserting myself. Tay looked at me with an intense gaze. As Peg walked away from this, she must have lost her mind. I joked to lighten the mood. Tay smiled and reassured me, "Don't worry, I'll take care of everything." Even though there was still a certain awkwardness in the air, I knew that being open about the situation wouldn't change anything. Tom's earlier statement about Tay's intimate needs was confirmed as we spent the next hour together. Afterward, as I walked them to their car, Tom shook my hand firmly, and Tay kissed me on the cheek. We all agreed that the day had been a success and decided to repeat it soon. To an outsider, it might have seemed like a typical Sunday barbecue. But beneath the surface, the dynamics were anything but ordinary. It seemed like we were just discussing plans for another barbecue. But by Monday afternoon, I had a meeting with John Abbott from the Corliss Agency. Handing me the report, He apologized. I'm very sorry. Every time I have to provide reports like this, I hope it's just a misunderstanding. But unfortunately, this time, it's not. Your fee also includes our representation in court, should it come to that. I shook his hand, thanked him, and left the office. On the way home, I realized I wasn't as angry as I thought I'd be. Perhaps it was because, deep down, I had already come to terms with the harsh truth revealed in the report. By the time I got home, I was ready to face what lay ahead. What should I do about the situation that was now spinning in my head? It seemed like I had exhausted all possibilities. There was only one solution left: to use the home loan line without Peggy's knowledge, at least until it was too late for her to intervene. I planned to consult a lawyer to prepare the necessary documents, though I delayed submitting them for the time being. Over the next 5 weeks, I met regularly with Tom and Tay, either at their home or at mine. They spread the word among our circle that I was going through a difficult time and were there to support and encourage me during this challenging period. Meanwhile, Peggy called me once a week as usual. But this time, I didn't bother to ask how she was doing or when she was coming home. I had reached my breaking point. It was time to take matters into my own hands. I wrote checks against the credit line, found a new apartment, and filed for divorce from Peggy. The documents cited irreconcilable differences instead of adultery, as I didn't want her to find out about Adam White. I hoped that handling the situation this way would push Peggy to decide on her next move. I was confident she would call me soon, sweetly suggesting we meet at a nice bar or restaurant to talk things over. When that call finally came, I reluctantly agreed to meet her, fully aware that I needed time to finalize my financial plans. Over drinks and dinner, she tried to convince me to reconsider my decision. I nodded along, pretending to listen, and promised to think about it. What she didn't know was that I was simply buying time. As predicted, a few days later, Peggy called again, urging me to abandon the idea of involving lawyers and to settle things amicably. I expressed fatigue from her indecision, explaining that it was time for me to accept the reality that she didn't want to be with me and move on. However, I agreed to meet her again at Angelo's. Seeing her for the first time since she had left, I couldn't help but notice how good she looked. As much as I knew I would miss her, I also realized that I still loved her. But even if she came back to me, I knew I could never return to the way things used to be. I kept these thoughts to myself during our meeting, listening as she fed me a stream of lies. She claimed to be seeing a therapist who was helping her cope with some unknown problem, and insisted she was making progress. She begged for a little more time, claiming it was just as hard for her as it was for me. I promised to think about it and give her an answer later. 2 days later, I decided it was time to take the next step. I called my lawyer and said, "It's time to move on." I withdrew the divorce papers and informed Peggy that the lawsuit had been canceled. While I was at work, Peggy called to express her gratitude and assured me that I wouldn't regret my decision. I smiled to myself, knowing that I didn't regret it, even though Peggy didn't yet know my true intentions. But she would soon find out. That evening, I had dinner with Tom and Tay. Later, Tay and I retired to her bedroom. Opening up to me, Tay expressed her desire to make love, wanting to share this intimate connection with the father of her child. When I asked if she was sure, she replied with unshakable confidence. The next morning, a home pregnancy test confirmed good news, and that afternoon, the doctor verified it. "You're going to be a dad," Tay said happily. Though it had only been one night, it was a long, leisurely, and incredibly enjoyable session. Afterward, I told her that we might not see each other for a while. "I'm wrapping up my business with Peggy and Adam White this week," I explained. "I may need to leave town for some time. Please don't make any hasty decisions, Rob," Tay said, her voice soft and pleading. "I need the father of my child to be present." That evening, Tom and I had a conversation. "Rob," he said, "the father of Tay's child is you. You've got to start thinking in those terms now. You know what I'm talking about, don't you?" Meanwhile, Adam White, a devoted member of the Fraternal Order of Eagles, had not missed a single meeting since being elected Sergeant at Arms. This small fact brought a glimmer of an idea into my mind, a strategy one could use to unravel the remaining pieces of this tangled web. On Wednesday, Adam White left his meeting with a sense of hope. After talking to several influential members of the Fraternal Order of Eagles, he was seriously considering putting himself forward for a higher position in the organization. However, his good mood quickly turned to shock later that evening. As he parked his car outside his apartment, a sudden, excruciating pain seized him, and everything went dark. A neighbor found him and immediately called 911. Paramedics arrived quickly and rushed him to the emergency department. There, doctors discovered he had sustained fractures to both arms and legs, along with serious injuries to his genital area. When he finally woke up in his hospital room, he was met with overwhelming pain and the horrifying realization that he was immobilized. His limbs were in casts, and he lay helplessly on a stretcher. As he drifted in and out of consciousness, he caught a glimpse of Peggy's shocked expression beside his bed. I wasn't present at the scene, but later I heard a detailed account of what had unfolded. While Peggy was standing by Adam's bed, a man entered the room, approached her, and asked if she was Margaret Olson. After verifying her identity, he handed her a set of papers, informing her she had been served with a summons. When Peggy opened the envelope and read that she was being sued for divorce on the grounds of adultery, her confusion was unmistakable. As her eyes landed on the word infidelity, her gaze shifted to the man lying broken on the bed in front of her. A look of horror crossed her face as she realized the full consequences of her actions. She sank into a nearby chair, tears streaming down her cheeks. Meanwhile, I remained at large. When the authorities questioned me about my whereabouts on the night of White's accident, it turned out I had an alibi. I was playing poker during an Eagles meeting, and ironically, Peggy herself had unknowingly confirmed my whereabouts during her own investigation. With the police clearing me of any involvement in White's misfortune, which couldn't be proven, I decided to move forward with my plans. The accident may not have been my doing, but Peggy's downfall was something I had carefully orchestrated over the weeks. Using her credit cards, I expressed my gratitude to a few friends. I paid for digital cameras for Bill and Steve through a chain of home improvement stores. I used her MasterCard to buy a laptop for Mike and a 19-inch flat-screen monitor for Phil on eBay. I even used her money to purchase an aluminum bat. Taking time off from work, I had 2 months to execute my plans. After White's hospitalization, Peggy was left scrambling. Credit card bills began to pile up, their savings and checking accounts were drained, and the CDs in the safe deposit box turned out to be fakes. Meanwhile, I withdrew from her life entirely. When Peggy began searching for me, calling my workplace my boss, fully aware of the situation, played along, telling her I was unavailable. To Peggy, it seemed as though I had suddenly appeared at work one day, announced my resignation, and demanded my final paycheck before vanishing. With no leads on my whereabouts, Peggy turned to my lawyer, only to learn that I had canceled the divorce proceedings and terminated his services. This left her with no options. Financially ruined, she was forced to file for bankruptcy. A few months later, she lost her home, traded her Lexus for a used Kia, and faced the harsh reality of her situation. While Peggy's life spiraled out of control, I returned from Mexico. I found an apartment on the other side of the city to ensure I wouldn't have to interact with her. Meanwhile, Tay, now 5 months pregnant, looked even more stunning than before. We quickly resumed our relationship, this time with no need for secrecy. We spent 2 to 3 nights a week together, either at her place or mine, enjoying the freedom of our new arrangement. 2 months after Peggy found out the truth about everything, I saw her waiting for me in the parking lot after work. Ignoring her, I got into my car and drove off, but Peggy followed closely behind. I slowed down to make sure she wouldn't lose me, deciding to meet her somewhere away from prying eyes. After about 10 minutes, I pulled into the parking lot of Bud's Bar and Grill, knowing it would be a quiet place to confront her. Peggy was going to catch up with me sooner or later. As soon as I entered Bud's Bar and Grill, she pulled into the parking lot behind me, clearly determined to have the long overdue conversation we both knew was coming. I took a seat at the bar and ordered a Bud Light. Moments later, Peggy walked in, her eyes scanning the room until they settled on me. With a determined glare, she strode toward me. As she approached, her anger bubbled over. She began swearing, warning me not to try to escape her wrath. I recognized the fiery side of Peggy I'd seen before, and I knew what she was capable of. Without thinking, I quickly turned in my chair and grabbed her wrist just as she attempted to slap me. Holding her tightly, I saw her wince in pain and gasped. "I have every reason to want to hurt you, Peggy," I warned her, my voice low and firm. "So you better not push me too hard. Keep your hands to yourself unless you want to experience real pain." I released her wrist gently, making it clear I wasn't trying to hurt her. "Yet, I wasn't avoiding you, Peg. I drove slowly so that you could follow me. I had no intention of discussing our problems in the parking lot at work." "It doesn't matter," she spat angrily. "Everyone there already knows what kind of trash you are." I sighed. "I really want to talk to you, but at the same time I don't. I'm tired of your lying words," I said, my frustration evident. "I want to return the money you owe me," she said defiantly. "And don't try to deny it. You took money against the house, and half of our property belongs to me. I want what's rightfully mine." "You're not getting anything from me, Peggy," I replied, meeting her defiance with my own. "I believe the amount I took is fair compensation for the harm you caused me. What do lawyers call it? Compensation for pain, suffering, and loss of intimacy." Peggy's jaw tightened as I continued. "I believe that the money I used adequately compensates me for being deprived of intimacy for 1.5 years while you were off with another man. Not to mention the humiliation I endured because everyone I knew thought I was a fool. Rob, I lost my parents' house because of you," she cried out in despair. "So what, Peggy?" I shrugged, smirking. "Money doesn't seem to mean much to you since you moved in with another man." "I'm serious, Rob. I need this money," she said, her voice pleading now. "Let me be clear, Peggy," I said coldly. "You'll never see a penny from me. You tried to cheat me and you got caught. Now you're paying the price. Deal with it." Her eyes narrowed as she hissed, "Let's see what the court decides." I chuckled mockingly. "Oh, it doesn't matter what the court says, Peggy. You'll have to hire a lawyer and sue me to get a divorce and divide the property. And if you do, be prepared for a counterclaim. A qualified lawyer can delay the process for 8 months, during which you'll be paying legal fees. Can you really afford that?" She was silent, glaring at me as I continued. "I have all the evidence I need to defend myself in court. And if I come out victorious, you'll be left with nothing. Worst case scenario for me, the court divides our property equally, and I'll just agree to it. But you and your lawyer? You'll have to wait forever for the payment, which will never come." I leaned in closer. "If you decide to sue, you can try to contact me, but I won't answer your calls. You'll keep paying your lawyer for nothing. The case will go back to court, and they'll issue a court order to pay by a certain deadline. But when that deadline passes, I won't have paid a cent. Your lawyer will bill you again for his time. And you know what, Peggy? I don't have any savings or checking accounts for the court to seize. My car is rented, so you can't claim that either. And I live in a furnished apartment, which makes it impossible for you to collect anything. Peggy's face grew pale as she processed my words. You see, Peg, I said, smiling, your only option is to ask the judge to threaten me with jail time for contempt of court. And even if you do that, all you'll get is a postcard from me sent from a quaint fishing village in Mexico. That's where I'll be living until my funds run out. I ended my tirade with a grin. I owe you a debt, Peggy. Thanks to your betrayal, I've gained the upper hand. Admit it, you played with me and got caught. Now I've evened the odds. Peggy looked stunned, her voice trembling as she asked, Is that you? Were you the one behind what happened to Adam? Remember, Peggy, I said calmly, assumptions are not the same as evidence. I stared at her pointedly, waiting for her response. By the way, how's your relationship going? I asked Peggy, laughing. I heard you haven't visited Adam in the hospital since the first day. Why? You've deprived him of the only valuable quality he had, she replied coldly. That's cruel, Peg. Even for you? I said, shaking my head. But it's true, she said matter-of-factly. He was good-looking and a wonderful lover, but eventually, I would have gotten bored and come back to you. If I had only known, all this drama could have been avoided. My actions certainly ruined everything, didn't they? She added bitterly. The regret that I couldn't communicate better will haunt me to my grave. Life could have been much more enjoyable if we had just discussed everything. You can be very unpleasant sometimes, Peg, I said, shaking my head. As for me, I guess I'm just a badass crook. I finished my beer, stood up, and bluntly told Peggy to lead a miserable life, then walked out of the bar. 3 days later, I was served with divorce papers citing irreconcilable differences. I didn't dispute the filing. After the dissolution of the marriage, Peggy received 50% of our shared property, and I was ordered to repay the money I had taken from the credit line. However, I casually declined to make any final payments, wishing her luck in trying to get anything more from me. Surprisingly, she never contacted me again, which suggested she may have believed my predictions about the case's outcome. Despite the confusing and bitter situation, there was one positive result. Everyone agreed that Adam White was a disrespectful person, and even people like him had few real friends. One of White's only friends turned out to be Peggy's boss, who was unhappy with her behavior during White's difficult time. As a result, he decided to terminate Peggy's employment. While her departure from the company was officially framed as a layoff due to the economic downturn, it was common knowledge that she had been fired. Unable to find a job in her district, Peggy decided to move to California, where she had relatives. Unfortunately, after her move, she stopped communicating with anyone, not even her sister. Despite this grim turn of events, there was a bright side to the story. Tay gave birth to a beautiful baby girl, and Tom showered her with love and affection, bringing a sense of joy and new beginnings to their family. I became Uncle Rob, a frequent visitor who spent countless hours playing on the floor with little Martha. However, Tom kept the true cause of his struggles, his inability to have children, a secret from both Tay and me. The underlying issue had been cancer, which went undetected and spread. After Tom's passing, Tay handed me an envelope with my name written on the front in bold letters. For Rob's eyes only, it read. When I looked at her, she shrugged. I haven't seen what's inside. It's for you, she said simply. Curiosity got the better of me and I opened it. Inside was a letter from Tom, written before his death. In it, he entrusted me, not Tay, with the responsibility of being his child's guardian. He had chosen me to look after his loved ones in his absence. Overwhelmed with emotion, I promised myself I would honor his trust and not let him down. I shared the letter with Tay, who broke into tears upon reading it. I held her close, comforting her through this difficult moment. After she had cried her heart out, she looked up at me and asked about my plans. I answered confidently, "I'm going to do exactly what you've already guessed. I'll take care of my girls." True to my word, 6 months later Tay and I got married. It marked a new chapter, one of healing, love, and family. Story 2. Did you hear that Jason Benson is coming to visit us for the 4th time? My friend Jeff asked one day. No, I haven't heard about it, I replied quietly. He must have climbed pretty high up the military ladder by now, Jeff continued. I remember years ago when he was just a captain. That's impressive, I said, acknowledging his achievements. Jason Benson was the epitome of the all-American guy in our town. He had been the star quarterback on the high school football team and a talented shortstop in baseball. He graduated at the top of his class and received offers from Division I universities. After excelling at West Point, he graduated near the top of his class, maintaining a reputation for excellence both on and off the field. He was a talented athlete, a disciplined soldier, and an exemplary citizen. I had to admit that Jason possessed qualities I didn't. Usually, his success didn't bother me, but there was one issue that I could never ignore: his past relationship with Sarah, who is now my wife. Back in high school, everyone thought Sarah and Jason were the perfect couple. Sarah was an outstanding athlete, the second-best student in her class, and widely regarded as the most beautiful girl in Williamsport. When Jason and Sarah broke up after high school, he went to West Point, and she attended Temple University. They never rekindled their relationship. At the time, I was 2 years younger than them. I was 2 years older than Jason and Sarah back in school. Not the best student, but still successful in my own way. I studied engineering at a public university and eventually became passionate about programming as computers became more integral to daily life. After gaining experience working for several companies, I finally built up the courage to start my own business. The decision to marry Sarah is one that still feels surreal to me. Somehow, I managed to convince her to say yes, and it remains the greatest achievement of my life, or at least the most significant step I've ever taken on my own. Our 2 daughters, however, are a joint effort and a true source of pride for both of us. Sarah rarely mentioned Jason, fully understanding my discomfort with that part of her past. Yet, invariably, well-meaning people would bring up his name from time to time as if testing my tolerance. I always felt an undercurrent of expectation that I should somehow hold Jason in high regard, as if I should validate the idea that he had once been with Sarah. It seemed that my own feelings and emotions about Jason were irrelevant to those around me. Some people even believed that Sarah would have been better off if she had stayed with Jason. However, I'll always admire Sarah's parents for never hinting at anything like that. In fact, many years ago, at a family picnic, Sarah's mother shut down such a suggestion in spectacular fashion. I remember the day clearly. One of Sarah's cousins made the thoughtless comment that Sarah should have married Jason instead of me. It was a cruel and hurtful remark, the kind only a fool would make in front of a crowd. But Sarah's mother quickly put her cousin in their place. In front of the shocked and silent group, she defended me, emphasizing what a wonderful husband and father I was. She made it clear that the cousin's comment was ignorant and completely unfounded. I'll never forget Sarah's mother's sudden outburst. It made Sarah smile, and under the table, she squeezed my hand surreptitiously. Sarah has always treated me with love and respect, never giving me a reason to feel that I wasn't the perfect husband for her. And yet, I often felt unworthy. I was constantly being compared to Jason Benson, a hero admired by all. It felt like I would never measure up to him, either in my own eyes or in the eyes of others. My conversation with Jeff about Jason ended abruptly when my younger daughter, April, caught a basketball from an opponent and dashed down the court. Both of my daughters were playing in the summer basketball league. April's speed and aggressiveness made her a fierce competitor. Opponents often seemed reluctant to face her on the court, with one notable exception: her older sister, June. June was graceful and effortlessly athletic, qualities that made her an exceptional player. Although she was also great at basketball, she had decided to focus on volleyball, earning herself a scholarship to Temple University in the fall. April, still a junior in high school, was a key player on her basketball team, which was gunning for a district championship and aiming to make it to the state level. Watching my daughters play sports was always a joy. They excelled in every sport they tried and gave their all every time. Their natural athleticism and speed, clearly inherited from Sarah, made them the best athletes on any team. June had recently been named the top player in her class, earning recognition and awards from her coaches. April wasn't far behind, and many believed she would claim that same title when her turn came. After the game ended, I came down from the stands to meet the girls as they congratulated their opponents. "Not a bad game, huh, Dad?" June asked me with a grin. "Not bad at all," I replied, smiling. April had dominated the court, barely allowing the other team to make it past the half-court line. Toward the end, her coach even had to remind her to ease up on the defense. "We're here to win, not crush their morale," he had said. April, ever the team player, understood and loosened up, giving her opponents a chance to breathe. June followed suit, giving her rivals a fair chance. But even then, she still managed to be the top scorer of the game. It was a testament to her skill and grace. "Well, girls," I said, "this league promises to be a fun experience for all the kids." When we discussed our goals at the start of the season, it was all about teamwork and sportsmanship. "Coach Simons made a big impression on me today," June said thoughtfully. "Dad, you always try to make everyone happy, except when you're competing with April and me. You never go easy on us when we play at home." "That's because I know how tough you both are," I replied. "You're strong, both mentally and physically. I want you to understand how important it is to never give up and always give your best. That's what makes a true competitor." "No one underestimates you, Dad," June said with a grin. "But you always say that competing in business or sports is about balance. Do you think I'll succeed in business if I let my clients win at golf?" "It's a difficult balance, Dad," April interjected, laughing. "It might be easier for you to lose to your clients, but June can definitely beat you on the golf course. I doubt you could handle her easily. You may not be the best golfer in the world, but you've definitely got some skills, young lady," I said, encouraging April. The banter continued all the way home. I realized how important it was to teach my daughters about the balance between striving for success and showing grace in defeat. As I parked the car, I smiled to myself. Even if I wasn't perfect, I knew I was doing my best as their father. When we got home, I didn't try to come up with the perfect response to their jokes. I simply reflected on how fortunate I was to be able to coach and guide them as they grew. Not just as athletes, but as individuals. Teaching children sports is something I enjoy even more than playing with them. Sarah, a natural athlete, had passed down her skills to our daughters, while I had to work hard just to keep up. As we entered the house, Sarah moved gracefully behind us, listening intently as the girls shared the details of their day and the highlights of their game. I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of gratitude for the connection they shared. How did I get so lucky? 3 amazing women had found their way into my life. Sarah, my accomplished and loving wife, and our 2 incredible daughters, who were a source of endless pride. Sarah was a highly successful professional in the hotel industry. Despite her parents' hopes that she would pursue law, she had forged her own path. After graduating from university, She quickly rose through the ranks at a local hotel and conference center that was part of a major chain. 2 years ago, she reached the top job at the hotel. However, when she was offered a promotion that would have required a move to Kansas, she turned it down. Her career choices had always been rooted in both ambition and family priorities. As we settled in, I noticed that Sarah looked a little more dressed up than usual. "Sarah, was there anything special today?" I asked. "You look a little more polished than normal, and you had to stay late. Did the top management come to town for the holiday?" Sarah hesitated, then admitted, "No, but you're very observant, Greg. The day after tomorrow is the 4th of July, and the hotel always sponsors the Grand Marshal's expedition. This year, the newspaper wanted photos before the parade." Suddenly, a wave of unease swept over me. Something in her demeanor felt off. Her hesitation was a wake-up call for me. "Sarah, our beloved golden boy and war hero is supposed to be in town for the filming, isn't he?" I asked, my voice tightening. "You didn't mention that he's also the Grand Marshal of the parade. Will he be filming with you?" Sarah's composure faltered as she clenched her hands and glanced around the room, looking for a distraction. Her usual confidence was shaken, which only piqued my interest further. She finally admitted, "The hotel generously donated a room for him. Jason Benson, the local military hero. It's just good public relations. His parents moved away from Williamsport, and he doesn't have a place to stay here anymore. Since he's the Grand Marshal, it made sense to offer him a room. It's nothing more than good business," she insisted, raising her voice slightly. Her explanation didn't sit well with me. "If there's nothing to worry about, Sarah, why do you seem so anxious?" I pressed. Reluctantly, Sarah confessed, "Well, maybe a little. It's just that we've always tried to avoid the subject of Jason. I know how you feel about the fact that we dated in high school, and I know how annoying it is when people keep bringing up his name. This is strictly a business matter, Greg. You're my husband, the only man I love and have ever loved. You have to believe that." "I'm pleased to hear you say that, Sarah," I said, meeting her gaze. "But let me ask you this. If he means nothing to you, why did you feel the need to hide the fact that Jason is coming back to town?" She hesitated, then said, "I knew it was a sore subject, and I didn't want you to worry or get upset. He just doesn't mean anything to me, Greg." "Then I shouldn't have any reason to be upset, and you shouldn't have any reason to keep this from me, right?" I responded calmly. "No, Greg, not really," she said, her voice softening. "I'm glad we're openly discussing this. Jason's ghost has been hovering over us since we got married, or even before," she admitted. "So, are there any other events planned?" I asked, trying to keep the conversation neutral. "Colonel Benson will lead the parade, and then host an informal reception at the hotel the next day," Sarah explained. "The hotel is providing snacks and drinks, and people will have a chance to meet him and make a good impression. Do you have a problem with that, Greg?" she inquired cautiously. "Sarah, I don't think it matters at this point," I replied. "The plans have already been made, and I'll deal with it. I just want you to be honest with me. He doesn't mean anything to you, does he? You're not going to look at him like a deer caught in headlights, are you?" I asked, my tone laced with both seriousness and humor. Sarah looked annoyed at first, but then her expression softened into a smile. She stepped closer, hugged me tightly, and said, "Greg, I love you so much. You're the only man who's ever attracted the attention of this doe, or any other part of her body." We both laughed at her playful remark. "I hope this applies to everything, not just your eyes," I replied with a grin. "You know it's all yours, honey," Sarah whispered softly. "Every part of me, one of a kind and all for you." Later that evening, as we walked into the living room, We told the girls we were too tired to eat and were heading to bed. You'll have to make do with the leftover roast beef from last night, Sarah said with a teasing smile. June giggled and said, Too tired, huh? Looks like we better cover our ears. The last time you were this exhausted, you kept us up half the night. Sarah blushed but quickly responded, Maybe we should wait until the girls are asleep. She gently closed our bedroom door and whispered, I don't want them to get suspicious. They already think we're running some kind of intimate business. Too late for that, I said, laughing as we shared a quiet, intimate moment together. How was your day? I casually asked Sarah the next evening, though we both knew I was really asking about Jason and what was going on between them. It went well, Greg, she replied. Jason has become even more determined and energetic than he was in high school. I think his service as an officer and participation in the war have really developed his natural leadership qualities. I nodded, but her response didn't sit well with me. Sarah, I appreciate your point of view on Jason's growth as a leader, but let's be honest. When I asked for honesty, I wasn't looking for praise. I want to hear the truth about his flaws and, most importantly, why you chose me over him. That's the kind of honesty I want, I said firmly. Sarah looked at me for a moment before smiling softly. Greg, even if this guy is an Army Ranger and a war hero, all tough and impressive, he's still no match for you, she said reassuringly. That's the spirit, I replied with a grin. Care to share some details? Well, she said, her tone turning playful. The President of the United States personally called Jason today to thank him for his service. But don't forget, Greg, 2 years ago you were the Vice President of the Lost Club. Jason isn't even a member of the club, Sarah teased. I laughed and nodded. The guy probably thinks he's too good for the club, I said. He'll never make treasurer of a football club, that's for sure. He's a loser, Sarah added, giggling. Exactly what I was thinking, I said, shaking my head. Most likely, tomorrow after the parade, he'll bomb his interview on Fox News, and his book will probably be boring too. I doubt he'll become a general before he's 50. We both laughed. You know, I added jokingly, this is a real test of character. Anyone can get into trouble, but it takes a special kind of person to handle it like this. I have to admit, Greg, it really helps when we communicate honestly and like adults, Sarah said, grinning. No one compares to my man, she added, her smile full of affection. I hugged Sarah tightly, and when she looked up at me, I kissed her passionately. Why don't the two of you find a more private place? Someone quipped. Turning around, I saw April standing in the doorway. This is the kitchen where I cook, she teased, crossing her arms. Sarah blushed and tried to step back, but I held her close. Dad, you really love Mom, don't you? April asked, smirking. Do you think I'll ever find someone who loves me the same way? Not until you graduate from college, I replied with a grin. You won't have any trouble finding guys, Sarah assured April, smiling warmly at her. Admiring April's face, I felt my cheeks flush. Raising daughters can be challenging, but it's moments like this that make it all worthwhile. The 4th of July parade was a hit. Cable news crews covered Colonel Benson extensively, portraying him as a rising star who embodied everything the media wanted to showcase on Independence Day. Later that evening, I watched his interview on TV. I had to admit, Jason was charismatic and well-spoken. There was a genuine pride in his voice as he talked about being an American. The day after the parade was chaotic. Sarah left early to ensure everything was in order for the open house at the hotel, which they were hosting in Jason's honor. The presence of a cable news crew staying at the hotel only added to her stress. Wanting to show my appreciation for everything Sarah does for me and the girls, I stopped by Jeff's jewelry store. After browsing for a while, I settled on a pair of diamond earrings as a token of gratitude. Jeff tried to upsell me on a necklace, but I had already stretched my budget. The earrings were perfect, and I was excited to surprise Sarah with them later. That evening, while walking around the main conference room, I observed Jason. Despite everyone in the city seeming to idolize him, he remained humble and polite, which earned my respect. Sarah was effortlessly managing the event, ensuring everything ran smoothly. The hotel's reputation for hosting well-organized events was on full display. The event was supposed to end by 6 p.m., but by 7:30, a handful of admirers lingered, unwilling to leave until the free food and drinks were gone. Anticipating the end of the evening, I slipped into Sarah's office unnoticed. My plan was to surprise her with the earrings and invite her to a neighborhood party where she could show off her new jewelry. After waiting for about 15 minutes, I decided to use her restroom. As I was finishing up, I heard the office door open and close. My smile quickly disappeared when I realized a man's voice was speaking. The door to the restroom was slightly ajar, allowing me to eavesdrop on the conversation. "Sarah," the voice said, "I can't help but tell you again, you look amazing. Just being around you drives me crazy. You're still the most beautiful woman I've ever been with." It was Jason. My stomach turned, sweat broke out on my forehead, and I had to steady myself against the wall. "This is very flattering, but please refrain from making such statements about me," Sarah replied firmly. "I'm happily married, and I don't want any misunderstandings." "It was a long time ago," Jason said, his tone softening. "Let's leave it in the past," Sarah added, her voice steady but polite. "Sarah," Jason persisted, "I feel like there's still something between us. I've noticed it these past few days while we've been working together. Please call me Jay." "Jason," Sarah began, trying to keep her voice calm, "I'm married. My husband would suspect something right away. He would be upset, to put it mildly." Jason chuckled dismissively. "I've seen him, Sarah," he said confidently. "He's not the type to create problems. I've had plenty of people like him under my command. They never challenged me." "He won't dare say anything," Jason reasoned, his voice dripping with contempt. "That guy spends his time at girls' soccer practices and worrying about a change of clothes. He's no warrior." Hearing his condescension made my stomach turn, but I stayed quiet, breathing deeply to maintain my composure. My fists clenched as I listened to him mock me. His arrogance was infuriating, but I held back, knowing Sarah would realize I was eavesdropping if I reacted. "Jason," Sarah said after a pause, her tone slightly playful but firm, "why don't you stay a few more days if you want to see me? I can make sure your room is free from unnecessary hassle and easily accessible." "I can't," Jason replied, his tone softening. "I have to go to Washington tomorrow. It's part of climbing the corporate ladder. I've spent more than 20 years and a lot of effort on this, and I'm getting closer to my goal." Sarah nodded thoughtfully and shifted the topic. "Jason," she asked, "is it true that Rangers have a rule about never abandoning a comrade?" Jason's chest seemed to puff up with pride. "Yes, absolutely," he replied. "We take an oath to always have each other's backs. It's about trust, Sarah. That's what it means to be a Ranger." Sarah's voice took on a teasing tone. "Well," she said, "should we go to my room? Perhaps you'd like to spend the night with a real hero." Jason hesitated for a moment, clearly tempted, before replying smoothly, "Of course, Sarah, but first, I'd be happy to explain anything you need to know before we move on to a sweet night." Sarah's tone suddenly shifted, becoming more serious. "Jason," she said firmly, "why do you think you're better than my husband?" Do heroes really need medals and badges to be considered heroes? Jason paused, his usual confidence faltering slightly. I'm not sure I understand the question, he replied cautiously. My husband has never put his life at risk or served in a war, Sarah said, her voice steady and resolute. He stayed home, coached our daughter's soccer team, and attended parent-teacher conferences. He didn't do anything heroic in your sense of the word, but that doesn't make him less of a man or less of a hero to me. Jason remained silent, his arrogance momentarily checked, as Sarah continued. When the girls' soccer coach was injured in a car accident, Greg stepped up to take over the team. He didn't even know the rules at first, but he spent hours studying books and researching online to learn. Despite the mistakes and challenges, he became a rock for those girls, especially for our daughters. Her voice softened, filled with pride. When my father had a stroke, Greg didn't hesitate. He took care of him, showing his love and dedication to our family. That's the kind of man he is. He's my hero. Jason seemed to fidget uncomfortably, his bravado visibly cracking under Sarah's unwavering defense of me. Still, she wasn't finished. And when our daughter June was caught smoking in the garage with her friends, Greg confronted her in front of them. He put her on her knees and spanked her, something I never thought he'd do. June ran to her room, crying, saying she hated him. Greg stayed up all night worrying about her. The next morning, she came to him, apologized, and vowed never to smoke again. Then she hugged him. Sarah's voice cracked slightly, but she remained composed. That's what it means to be a real family man, Jason. It's not about medals or badges. It's about the little things, the sacrifices, the love, and the strength it takes to hold a family together. Greg is my hero, not you. Jason looked stunned, his attempt to impress her clearly unraveling. Sarah wasn't finished, though. Jason, she said firmly, you preach honesty and loyalty, yet you stand here trying to convince me to break my marriage vows. You demand I abandon my own principles for your selfish desires. How could you expect me to do that? To betray everything I stand for? You may have been a hero on the battlefield, but you're no hero here. My husband has my heart, and nothing will change that. Sarah's tone grew increasingly dispassionate as she confronted Jason. You claim that you've devoted so much time to your career and don't want to risk it, but what about my career? What about my life and the investments I've made in it? You didn't hesitate to jeopardize my job and my marriage by coming here and bragging about your achievements. Do you really value me? And my life so little? Haven't I spent 2 decades building my life, my marriage, my career? She demanded, her voice firm and unwavering. Jason hesitated, clearly unprepared for her intensity. After listening to your point of view, Sarah, I understand I may have gotten carried away, he admitted, his usual confidence faltering. I just think you're incredibly beautiful, and we've shared some unforgettable moments. Those memories belong to you, Jason, not me, Sarah replied curtly, her expression cold and resolute. Jason nodded hesitantly, then excused himself. He left abruptly, closing the door behind him. I remained frozen in the bathroom, afraid that Sarah would discover I had overheard their entire conversation. A moment later, I heard the office door open and close again, signaling that Sarah had also left. Once I was certain the coast was clear, I stepped out and quietly made my way to my car, dialing Jeff's number as I crossed the parking lot. Later that evening, while helping the girls in the kitchen, I couldn't stop anxiously waiting for Sarah to return. When she finally walked through the door, I couldn't help but say, "Sarah, I'm so glad you're home." She gave me a puzzled look and explained she had been busy finishing paperwork, but I didn't let her finish. I pulled her into my arms and kissed her, feeling a surge of emotion that was impossible to suppress. Hugging her tightly, my heart brimmed with joy and gratitude. When I finally let her go, my emotions still evident on my face, June giggled and teased, "Wow, Mom, Dad looks really pleased when he sees you, doesn't he? I hope my husband greets me like that after 2 decades of marriage," she added with a grin. Sarah glanced at me, studying my expression, clearly trying to figure out why I seemed so elated. She didn't press for an explanation, and I didn't offer one, but she smiled warmly. "June, I hope you find a husband like your dad," Sarah said, nodding in agreement. "He's always full of surprises and loves his family deeply." I smiled at her words and walked over to the kitchen drawer. From it, I took out a small, beautifully wrapped package and handed it to Sarah. She took it carefully, examining it with a mix of curiosity and anticipation. Slowly, she peeled away the wrapping paper, set it aside, and opened the box. As she lifted the lid, her eyes widened, and her breath caught. Inside were the diamond earrings I had picked out earlier that day. Tears welled up in her eyes, and when I glanced at my daughters, I saw their eyes glistening too. The room was suddenly filled with warmth and tenderness, as if the air itself had wrapped us all in an embrace. I stepped closer to Sarah and gently took the earrings out of the box. Carefully, I inserted them into her ears, feeling an overwhelming sense of love and pride. Sarah touched them lightly, her hands trembling, then looked up at me, her eyes shining with emotion. Watching the moment unfold, June asked softly, "Dad, are you crying?" I wiped a tear from my cheek and smiled. "These are tears of joy," I replied, my voice thick with emotion. "Because there is no one in the world better than your mother." Sarah leaned in, her arms wrapping around me tightly, and whispered, "I love you, Greg. Thank you for everything." And in that moment, surrounded by my wife and daughters, I knew that no matter the challenges we had faced, this was my family, my greatest achievement, and my greatest joy.